Not every career changes the course of history, but some quietly shape it behind the scenes. Welcome to the Marquis Masters podcast. I'm Nick Franck. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Leonard Gray, a retired chief scientist whose work in nuclear chemistry and plutonium research played a role in some of the most pivotal moments of the Cold War. From recovering critical materials to contributing to programs that helped bring that era to a close, his career spans more than 5 decades of science, innovation, and problem solving at the highest level. But what makes his story even more compelling is how he describes it. Not as a perfectly planned path, but as a series of doors opening and closing along the way, guided by faith, persistence, and a willingness to try something new. In this episode, we talk about the projects that defined his career, the mentors who shaped his journey, and the life lessons he's carried with him, from working in nuclear labs to raising bees as a kid. Let's get into it. I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Leonard Gray to the Marquis Master podcast. Dr. Gray is a retired chief scientist with a career spanning more than 5 decades in science and technology, including time at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Dr. Gray, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Well, it's allergy season.
It is. The weather is just drastically different outside, isn't
Right.
it? Just rainy, sunny, just messes everything up.
Well, it'll get over.
Dr. Gray, I want to go back to the beginning. I really want to start early in your life. Where did a passion for science and technology and chemistry, where did that all come from?
Well, my older brother was 13 years older than I am. He graduated from college, I think, when I was in the second grade. He lived about 75 miles away. He was a chemist. He had 2 jobs. One was his full-time job, and the other one was part-time. And he would take me occasionally to his part-time job, and I would see what a chemist really does. Not what the textbooks say, but what really happens. And that sort of got me started.
Yeah, you spanned a really long career working on a lot of really, really interesting projects, especially during the Cold War. I'm really interested in diving into some of those that you worked on, and what were some of the big ones and the most exciting projects that you got to be a part of?
Well, during the time of when the Cold War sort of toned down a little bit, a lot of stuff was not processed. It was just put over in this scrap pile. And then when the Cold War started heating back up, DOE wanted to really increase the number of weapons being produced. Well, they needed to go back and recover that material that had just been put away in waste. And so I helped develop the programs for just strictly waste that was plutonium, and also a number of spent fuel that was not weapons grade, but it could be converted to weapons grade. So we put the reactors at Savannah River on 3% plutonium instead of 6%. We recovered the plutonium from the spent fuel, blended it to bring it into weapons grade. Another one was, I don't know, there was quite a few different programs, but that was 2 of the main ones. Then the fourth one, I was asked by Lawrence Livermore, I got an unsolicited job offer from them to come out and handle the chemistry portion of the laser isotope separations program. Well, that one was going well, and it was the one that finally sent Russia into bankruptcy and ended the Cold War. So I'm very proud of the fact that I am a Cold War warrior, and that I did have a major role in at least 3 of the programs that helped spin them into bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's incredible. What exactly is, as someone who's not was never good at chemistry. I tried and was never really good at it. What is a laser isotope separation like? What does that entail?
Well, as the fuel is irradiated. Different isotopes are formed, depending upon what isotope you start with. And of course, most of it starts with U-235 and U-238. You first wind up with neptunium, and then the neptunium goes on over to plutonium. So you then recover that. You remove it from the reactors, you let it cool, then recover it. Then once you have recovered it and purified it, from Savannah River, it went to Rocky Flats. Rocky Flats actually made the core of the nuclear reactors. That was then sent to, I can't remember the name of in Texas it was sent to right now, where the weapon was actually made. So I remember one time when I was at Rocky Flats a lot, and they asked my bosses, please get him a year-long clearance instead of one every time he's coming, and he's out here 2 or 3 times a month. Well, when they asked after we watched a piece of material put together to actually form the weapons pit. And the pit comes from just about any other fruit that has a shell in the middle of it. That's where it actually comes from. But when I walked into the molten salt area, a guy popped up and says, Leonard, you got a phone call. Here, I'll give you the number. And my boss looked at me and he says, you're out here too much. You're not getting a year's clearance. You'll just be out here even more. So that's the way it went. But I don't know. I was at Rocky Flats a tremendous amount, especially as the Cold War was heating up and then cooling down.
Yeah. When you got into chemistry and you got into research, did you ever see yourself being this person that was so integral in these kinds of things, like being so involved in like helping with the Cold War and helping with the efforts to win that war? Like, did you ever foresee that happening when you were younger, when you were like with your brother and you were like just kind of following him along, and then like, wow, like, do you ever think back at that? And
no,
yeah.
I never even considered the fact that I would go as high up the ladder as I did. That was just not something that I was thinking I would do. So you just have to keep trying and doing your job, do it well, and the awards and the promotions and such just follow along.
Yeah. I wish we could sit here and talk for a really long time, but I understand you're also writing a story about your life, which I imagine is going to be incredible. Can you talk a little bit about your process? Like, what got you to get into writing? What does the process look like? What's going to be in it?
Well, so far as getting into writing, I have about 200 publications to my credit. Most of them are classified, so you can't get them.
I can't read,
but
sure. Okay.
That's where I learned to write. I'm sorry, when I left college, I still did not know how to write. I just thought I did. But when I went to work at Savannah River, they put me through a writing course, and I really learned how to write. Then I'd always tried to find out something about my grandparents, and my maternal grandmother died when my mother was not even 2 years old yet. She was less than 10 when her father died. On the paternal side, my grandfather died when my father was about 4. So obviously I never knew them. I did know my grandmother, but I always wanted to know more about them than my parents were telling me. And then a traveling companion says, I'm going to start a program. I don't know what her sources were to get it, but it was 50 questions about me. And if you go online now, you'll find that there's a lot of different people are putting this online. They will write it. Just give them the answers to the 50 questions. They will write your thing. When Marquis asked me to give them the information for them to write one, I basically gave them the 50 questions, the answers to them. And I really liked the way Jenny did it. She did an excellent job. I gave that to my nieces and nephews. And my nieces especially says, we want more. You've just gotten us started in your life. We want more. And so I am now taking those 50 questions since I saved the answers. And I'm trying to document my life in, a lot of the stories that you just don't normally see in biographies. To let them know, hey, I'm human. I make mistakes. I feel like that I have tried to follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit throughout my whole life. And I know, just like I think it's Romans 4:13 says that if you follow him, he will guide you. And God certainly has opened doors. He's closed doors to lead me through my education, to get me involved in nuclear chemistry. And he did it by opening doors and closing doors. I wanted to go to Georgia Tech, for instance. That was my dream. I was going to go to Georgia Tech, possibly go to Jacksonville, and work with my brother as a chemist. Georgia Tech would not accept me. They said of their evaluation, I wouldn't even survive the first quarter. So I went to Middle Georgia. That was one closed door. Then at Middle Georgia, when I was approaching graduation, I went to my college professor, our president, and asked him for a recommendation on where to go to school. He says, give me 2 weeks, I'll get some recommendations for you. And he sent me a note a couple of weeks later to come by his office, and he says, the recommendations I'm getting to fit all the things that boundaries that you have set is New Mexico Tech. So I wrote New Mexico Tech. I'd never heard of them. 5 days after I mailed the letter, I got a telegram from Dr. Stubbs saying, you have been accepted. Please forward an application. I did. When I got there, I hit another closed door. They required 2 lower division science courses that I did not have in Middle Georgia. They required that you take them your first year there. Those 2 courses interfered with a 3-course sequence, and the 3rd course in organic chemistry was only taught in spring. That meant that I had to spend an extra year at New Mexico Tech for 1 course. Of course, I took a lot of other courses. But Dr. Stubbs had hit mandatory retirement at New Mexico Tech, and he had moved to Texas Tech. I wrote him and asked him for a letter of recommendation to go to work at Los Alamos National Laboratory. He sent me back a letter. He says, Leonard, I will give you a letter of recommendation to go to any graduate school in the country, but I will not give you a letter of recommendation to go to work. By the way, I've obtained for you a teaching assistantship here at Texas Tech. Please forward an application. Then, as I was approaching graduation with my master's degree, my father's boss's wife was the secretary for the draft board in my home county. And she sent me a message that if I went to work for any chemical firm, I would not be drafted. If I stayed in college, I would be drafted, and I more than likely would be sent to Vietnam. I started applying for jobs. I didn't know whether I can get one or not. I wound up with 4 job offers. And one morning, my first wife and I were listening to a radio broadcast while we were eating breakfast. And it was about how to accept a job. when knowing which one they offer to accept. Well, I explained the 4 jobs, and the guy says, well, the one in South Carolina is much closer to your family. I would choose that one. Well, I got there before my clearance was granted, and I was assigned to work at a place where I could work without a clearance. Well, as soon as my clearance came through, they moved me over to the separations technology portion of the solvent extraction system. And it just went on from there. There was doors shut, doors open. I told them when I went to work, I was going to work for 3 years, and then I was going back to school and get my PhD, which I did. And that's sort of the way I wound up where I did.
Have you ever wondered how some people's stories live on, not just through their work, but through history itself? For nearly 130 years, Marquis Who's Who has been documenting the lives of leaders, innovators, and changemakers across every profession. From CEOs and scientists to artists and educators, Marquis has captured the stories behind success, the people who define our times. Being listed in Marquis Who's Who isn't just recognition, it's taking control of your personal brand and using it to create a meaningful and impactful legacy. It's a record of your life's work, preserved, published, and accessible to generations who will study, research, and be inspired by your contribution. If you've built something meaningful and you've made an impact in your field or community, this is how you ensure your story is told and your personal brand is maintained accurately with integrity. Visit MarquisWho'sWho.com to learn more about how you or someone you admire can be featured, because history remembers those who take the time to record it.
Isn't it kind of interesting how through our lives, especially in the moment, it feels like such a big thing, right? Where that door does close and you're like, oh,
Yes.
man. And then, but when we scope out and we look back, sometimes we're like, oh, well, if this wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't have been able to do this and then this. Right. And it's just, do you see that as fate? Do you see that as faith? Like, where do you think all of that kind of like plays together in that?
Well, I think if you try to follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit, there will be doors closed. There will be doors open. You just have to be careful on open doors that it's the Holy Spirit opening it, not Satan. Because I had Satan open one and I stepped through it. I shouldn't have. But God brought me back to Savannah River. So he did something good out of things that I did bad.
Yeah, I think we've all kind of been in those spots. Let's dive a little bit more into you. You mentioned you have an older brother who's a little bit older than you. I'm in a very similar boat. I have siblings that are both 10 years older than me. And so it almost felt like you're an only child for a long period of time. What was it like for you growing up?
Well, my dad was a beekeeper. He also worked for the Atlantic Coastline Railroad. But as I got old enough to go to the apiaries or bee yards, whichever one you know them as, he started taking me with him. Now, he had a 35 Ford truck, which he traded in 49. So I know I started before 49, but I had been going for at least a couple of years. So I guess I started in the spring before I turned 7. But all the way, Dad wanted to expand his business, which he did. He finally got it up to where by the time I was 12, we were harvesting and packing 15 tons of honey per year. But I was going with him every afternoon when he got home from the ACL shops. We were either in the building supplies, going out to the bee yards, whatever. Then when I turned 14, Dad hired a guy to drive for me. And Rig and I harvested most, not all, but most of the honey. Then Dad and I harvested on Saturday Rig and I would do it during the week. But I just came up working. If you've ever worked in any form of agriculture, you know your family expects you to do things long before it may be legal to hire you to do it. But and that's the way I came up. But it taught me so many things that I did not realize until I fully retired in 21, and we were studying the life of Joseph. And I started comparing my life to Joseph's life. And I realized things that God had done in my life. And I really knew it was him that did it, not me.
Yeah, I as someone who grew up with a family of farmers, I very much understand exactly what you're talking about. When you think back through your life, you know the professors, the people that wrote you recommendations, that gave you guidance. I think you've probably mentioned them already, but were there any specific people that you would can attribute to providing you support, guidance throughout your life?
I think Dr. Morris Stubbs was the one who provided the most guidance to me. I know he was very upset when I left Texas Tech and went to work. But I don't know, 10 or 12 years later, I guess it was, I was going to a meeting at Los Alamos, and I knew that Dr. Stubbs had retired at Texas Tech and had gone to work at a Catholic university in Albuquerque. So when I got to Albuquerque, I called him, and his wife answered the phone. And I don't think she even took the phone away from her mouth. She just screamed out, "Morris, there's Leonard Gray on the phone. You want to talk to him?" He came to the phone. He did not say hello. He did not say how are you. He said, "Leonard, did you go back to school and get your PhD?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did." He said, "I'll talk to you then." But I don't know. He was just one that was always available for good and honest interpretation of what was going on, giving you directions, just more so than any other professor I had. And although I had a number of good professors so far as giving me directions was concerned, he was just the best one.
Yeah, it's always so great to have that person in your life who's willing to give it to you straight when you need it, right? Like the person who doesn't fluff around the edges or is trying too hard to protect your feelings. It's more about like, here's the harsh truth of what's going on.
Right.
Accept it or you cannot. And so you talked a little bit about some outside people who have had an influence. How has your family played a role? What kind of family influence and how has that played into your career and your success?
Well, when I was 7, the fall that I was 7, we had packed the honey crop, and Dad gave me a check for $600. And we went down to the bank and for me to deposit it. And the clerk looked at me and she looked at my dad and she said, "Are you sure?" Dad says, "Yes, he's opening his account to go to college." Well, now we have 529 plans. Well, we didn't have a 529 plan then.
Right.
But by the time I actually started college, I had $6,000 or $7,000 in my account. But so he made sure that I kept working towards that goal. And I really have to give him credit for that because I don't know that I could have done that the way he did it.
When you're not, or when you weren't working, when you weren't with the bees or in the laboratory, or now that you are retired, like how are you spending your free time?
Well, since we moved to Florida, both of us came down with COVID, and it really gave us a whammy. Our cardiologist says that the major thing that we had against us was the vaccines, not COVID itself. So neither Sandy nor I have really been up to going and doing what we had done during my first retirement when I semi-retired. But I kept working part-time for 16 years. Well, during that 16-year time frame, since I did not have a 9-to-5 schedule, we had the time to travel. With Social Security, my pension checks from both the University of California for Lawrence Livermore and from DuPont at Savannah River, we had the finances to travel. We had the health to travel. We were on the Great Wall of China with a lady who was 92 that day. We were in Easter Island with a guy who was 93. Had his birthday while we was there. So we were looking forward to continuing to travel. And COVID and the vaccines have just knocked that out of us. But I think we're beginning to recover now. And hopefully we can get back to at least traveling around Florida. I know in Sandy's first marriage, her husband was a boater, and they explored all the rivers and swamps and everything else up and down Florida. Well, I haven't seen Florida. I would like to go see part of it. Yeah. I've gotten lost in Tampa. I've been to Silver Springs, and I've been to Daytona, and that's just about it.
Right.
So I want us to get to where we can go and actually travel some more.
Right. When you were working and when you were, it doesn't matter where you were working, how important was it for you to give back to your community?
Well, I've always considered that something that I wanted to do. I was ordained a deacon in my church in North Augusta when we were at Savannah River. I served on the deacon board there, also in Livermore when we were there. I also served as president of the board of trustees in Livermore. When I lived in North Augusta, my son had inherited my dyslexia, and we got him into the Augusta Reading Foundation, and I served as president of the Augusta Reading Foundation for 3 years while he was there for 5. I'm a Gideon. I've handed out Gideon Bibles primarily in California, but also in other states. So that's some of the things that I have done.
Yeah, that's great. If you could have, if you're traveling out to Florida, you're seeing, you're driving around, you're back and traveling, and you could go on the boat, you're out in the water, and you could bring one person with you, whether they're living, whether they're past, anyone, who would you bring out on the boat to have a lunch with?
I think I would choose Oppenheimer. I met most of the people who are really named in developing nuclear weapons, but Oppenheimer's wife had ties with the communists, and he lost his clearance before I ever started to work. So I never got to meet Opie. But he's one that I would really like to, sit there with a fishing pole and have some conversations with.
That would be, that would be a really interesting conversation that would be had with that. When you think back over the course of your career, you've talked a lot today about doors have closed and doors have opened. Do you think that I don't want to say, did you go through every right door? But do you think if you would start your career over again, do you think you would have made the same choices? Would you have gone down the same path knowing how it turned out now?
I hope I would have, with the exception of the time I stepped through the door that Satan opened. I could certainly do without that, but my wife was suffering with bipolar depression, and our marriage was just going kaflooey. She wanted to leave. She wanted to go here. She wanted to go there. She just wanted to leave. She was not happy. Well, she worked for a headhunter, and the headhunter found me a job in Louisiana. Well, about the same time, Savannah River had swapped some of their supervisors around, and I wound up with one that knew nothing about research at all. He was probably very good as a program manager, so long as it did not do with research. Well, I had 10 publications that year on solving one problem after another in the plant. And he told me if I could publish 10 papers, I didn't have enough to do. And he gave me a 2% raise. So I was just totally PO'd. And with a wife with bipolar oppression, I just stepped through and went to the job in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I knew I had made a mistake before I ever left my driveway in North Augusta. But they sent me to Jamaica and several other places trying to build their lab up. They had bought the company, and I went over all of the procedures and everything in the chemistry laboratory, and all of everything was out of the 30s. They had not updated anything. And I don't know, after spending time at DuPont, I knew what things should be like. But for instance, for Thanksgiving, the lab had a Thanksgiving dinner. The food was placed on the bench tops right there in the lab. The food was heated in the same furnaces that all the samples were dried in. When I rewrote everything, I brought it up to standards. And, that made a lot of people mad. But management accepted it and enforced it. So I wasn't hitting too well there. And my boss suggested, since I hadn't not been back home for a while, that I'd take a week off and go back home and visit with my family. And when I was there, or actually when I was in Jamaica, something just kept telling me I needed to go back to Savannah River. Well, I knew I didn't want to go to the plant. I wanted to go to the lab. So when I got back there, I called up the lab and told them I would like to come back. And even though it was Christmas week, they gave me an interview. I guess it was about 9 months later, when the evaluation of all the employees was going on, I was called up to my section director's office. And I obviously got there ahead of when I was expected. Because one of the guys says, I know that Leonard was undoubtedly the most egotistical person I have ever interviewed in my life. He told me I could take my 2 best employees and he would outperform them. Mm. And he says, I'll be damned, he's done it. So anyhow, I started getting awards. I started getting promotions. So I definitely think God opened the door for me to come back to Savannah River.
Yeah.
Then he opened the door for me to go to Livermore.
Yeah. Doors closing, doors opening. Right. When you think back through your career, what do you think is one of the most important lessons that you've learned and taken away?
Well, I think that one thing that is to don't be afraid to try something new. If you remember, the Titanic was built by people who supposedly knew what was going on. The Ark was built by amateurs. The Ark did not sink. The Titanic did. So don't be afraid to try something new, because you can always, if it doesn't work trying it that way, try another way. And certainly if you try to lean on the Holy Spirit, he will certainly guide you. I know some of the statements that I had, I was given a program that I just did not know where to start. And I was looking at my samples, and a voice in my head kept saying, remember hunting queen bees. What in the world does queen bees have to do with an explosion just occurred? But it just kept coming, and they seemed to emphasize the word hunting, not the word queen bees. Well, if you've ever seen a frame of bees running around, there's hundreds, thousands of bees running around on that frame. And one bee is a little bit different. That bee is the queen. You have to replace the queen at least every third year. Otherwise, she's going to leave the hive. She's going to take half the bees with her, and you're certainly not going to have as big a honey crop. So when you know how to do it, and Dad was taught how to do it by a very prominent beekeeper when he and his mother moved to Waycross in, what was it, about 1920. Don't be afraid to try something new. Just keep going.
I love that. And Dr. Gray, before I let you go, what does being a Marquis Who's Who listee mean to you?
Well, I am very honored to have the title. I know when the phone call came in, I almost did not take it. A lot of the times, if we don't recognize the number, we just don't answer the phone. And we try to turn the phone off when we have something like this, but I'm sorry we didn't turn it off. But I think, I don't know, I've had a number of honors given to me. I'm in who's who in science and technology, who's who in America. I have the Glenn T. Seaborg Actinide Separations Award. But all of those are because I was willing to try something new.
Yeah. Dr. Gray, it was such a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you for sharing your stories and your time with me.
Well, appreciate it.
Well, if this conversation resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone else interested in science, innovation, the stories behind people shaping major events that are happening in history. If you'd like to hear more conversations with experts and leaders like Dr. Gray, be sure to visit marquiswhoswho.com, subscribe to the Marquis Masters podcast wherever you're listening, and if you enjoyed the episode, leave it a review, share it with other individuals who might find it enjoyable. Once again, thank you so much to Dr. Leonard Gray for joining me. I'm Nick Franck, and we'll catch you for the next Marquis Masters podcast.